ever tried to get a new birth certificate?
I actually have.
And
yes.
tell us about the process.
I was able to get a real ID and a passport. It worked out.
Right, but did you get your birth certificate?
Welcome back to Politics in America, guys. We are talking tonight about voter ID and the SAVE Act that the Trump administration is trying to pass. You know what? The talking point that a lot of these Republicans are making about Americans are smart. They know how to go ahead and go about doing this. It's not about being smart or intelligent. It's more about the accessibility and the cost that's going to come with needing additional documents. Look, in a lot of states already, there is voter ID, which is something that a majority of the population agree with. But voter ID is just showing an acceptable ID. Either your photo ID if you don't have a driver's license, or your driver's license. You know, you can show either of those things or a real ID as well, and you can vote. So that already exists in a bunch of states. But this isn't what the SAVE Act actually is. The SAVE Act requires you to have a birth certificate or a passport, which about half the population doesn't really have either, you know, readily available. So let's go ahead and watch this clip and we'll talk about it through this segment, guys.
We are back, and we were just discussing the SAVE Act and the new citizenship requirements that it would put into place. Now, the big issue, as I was saying right before the break, is not just should there be citizenship requirements, but also how they are supposed to happen. One of the problems is the distances people would have to travel in order to produce the citizenship requirement in person. If you live in Arizona, from Colorado City, Arizona to Mojave, Arizona, the elections office there, it would take 8 hours round trip to go and produce the documents that you would need to produce. And I actually wonder if Republicans, maybe they do know this, but they understand that this probably won't pass, should not be more worried about this. Look at the top 10 states where the lowest percentage of people have passports. They're all Trump voting states, every single one of them, from West Virginia to South Dakota. These are all states where more than half of the citizens don't have passports. And so if they don't have passports, they would have to produce a birth certificate. That's going to be a barrier to a lot of these voters who are probably Trump supporters.
And yeah, she's right. You know, there's so many people out there that just don't have this stuff, guys. See, here's the thing with a lot of what, I don't recall if they say in this panel, but that they have said in the past is, oh, I already have a passport, so I'm all good. A lot of people in this country do not travel internationally. A lot of people cannot afford to travel internationally. So it's not something that everybody has, and there is a cost associated with getting a passport. So for these people that come on these panels and just say, oh, well, you know, if you already have your passport, just show that as well. Yeah, you travel for work, dude. You know, you go to different places across the world for work. So you have your passport because of that. And you are able to do this because you have accessibility to the cost of it and all that. Not everyone has that stuff. So it's really stupid when they use that talking point. And there's a great part later on in this clip that I will get to when we get to it. But yeah, let's just continue on from here.
Well, look, I think we have a lot of faith in people that they can figure it out. People are smart. I think we have faith in our constituency. And I would also note that the act does allow some discretion to the states. And there's incidents that happen all the time. What if your birth certificate is in a fire? You can get a new one. There are ways of getting documentation.
Have you ever tried to get a new birth certificate?
I actually have.
And
yes.
Tell us about the process.
I was able to get a real ID and a passport. It worked out.
Right, but did you get your birth certificate?
Did she get her birth certificate? Right? So that's the thing. Look, she's clearly caught in a lie here. That's what makes this part so hilarious, is they love to just talk out of their ass sometimes. You know, oh, I got a birth certificate. It was no problem. Okay, tell us about the process. Oh, you know, so long ago, I don't remember. You don't remember, but you remember it being easy? Come on. Like, I love that Abby caught her in that moment, and everyone else is just like, yeah, no, you didn't get your birth certificate. And who knows, maybe she did, but she's clearly showing the tell that she got caught here, and it's just hilarious to me, that moment. So I'm going to put it back a little bit just so you guys can see that part again.
Have you ever tried to get a new birth certificate?
I actually have.
And
yes.
tell us about the process.
I was able to get a real ID and a passport. It worked out.
Right,
Oh,
but
you
did you
did
get
have
your
a birth
certificate?
birth certificate?
It was when I was in college. This was a while ago.
Okay.
But I mean,
Because,
I was
because
able
look,
to get a
because, you know,
passport.
but look, I mean,
And you also have resources to get it done.
if you
That
get,
too.
listen, I'm not saying it's obviously not impossible to get your birth certificate, but
These
it's
things
not
happen.
it's not something that happens in the blink of an eye.
It's not.
You sometimes have to go to county officials, even hospitals, to try to get the records. It costs money. It costs.
I think that
I'm just all I'm pointing out.
But that would be
Hold
true
on a
for
second.
getting a driver's
Hold on
license.
Hold on a second.
it's not.
No,
It's not true of getting a
no.
driver's
It's not
license.
the same.
It's not. First of all, it's not true of getting a driver's license. You can get a driver's license that is not a real ID, that does not require your birth certificate. But also, let's talk about real ID for a second. Do you remember how long it took for real ID to actually become a thing in this country? It took 17 years because it kept getting pushed back because people couldn't do it in.
But we
not only
implemented
that-
it, and it's
But not only-
17
but not only-
years.
but not only that-
17 years later, and it's
But
not.
people figured it
but
out.
hold
Maybe we should expect
but
more
you know
people.
What? Even to this day, you go to the airport, and because so many people don't have real IDs, they're like, all right, you can fly with one. You just have to pay us $45.
But not only that. I mean, people don't even understand the cost to the states. I mean, it's as if people just see something and they're saying, oh my God, we need to tighten up voting parameters to keep illegals or whatever from voting. But people don't ever turn the page. And when we're talking about turning the page, there's one thing that's very tangible. When you talked about, people getting driver's license or states that have voter ID, what those states also did was make those identification cards free. They had to. They had to waive it. That cost states millions of dollars to implement.
They should hear, by the way. I agree with you.
They actually will have to shut down systems because you cannot do this online. We're talking about people driving and doing this. And so that's one thing. The other thing is the historical point that people somewhat disregard. And I think, and I'm not sure that I'm not sure that you understand the historical consequence to what you're saying when you're saying that we should expect more from people or people will have to jump over this bar, because there are groups of people in this country that traditionally, and this is a moment of empathy that I think we can both see eye to eye on, that there are people in this country who historically have had to jump over hurdle after hurdle after hurdle after hurdle. There have been people, one second, Joe. There have been people who have died. There have been people who've laid on jailhouse floors. There have been people who have beaten just so they could have the franchise. And we've heard before, you should be able to read a literacy test. You should be able to drive here. You should be able to do that. I think we should start from a point of how do we allow more people into the process instead of the point of how do we restrict it. I didn't mean to cut you off, but
I was cutting you off.
I know, yeah.
Now, I've known you a long time.
Sure.
I didn't know you in 2011, 2012 when you were state senator.
Rep.
I
didn't need a
imagine,
pay
I
raise.
imagine you had the same arguments, the same conversations as South Carolina implemented these similar voter ID laws. I imagine some of the things you said tonight, you could have said verbatim back then.
True.
And the net result, and then undeniable, the net result is that turnout increased in
But
South
the
Carolina
difference is-
after voter ID
the
laws
difference
came in.
is-
It
the
went from
difference-
56% to, I think, again,
very
65% and then
very
61%.
in the weeds, very in the weeds. Many of the states that have passed voter ID, I mean, one of the most stringent, if you look at ALEC, you look at all this stuff, Indiana was the first state to pass voter ID. What they did, though, however, was they allowed you to utilize things like a utility bill. They allowed you to utilize things like a college ID.
Right.
Save
So
Act
there
allows
was
you to vote affidavit.
so there
It
were
allows
other
you to vote
mechanisms
affidavit.
in place. So my point is, why are we tightening this noose around people when just
Can you-
simply
can the people,
why can't we do it
the
online?
polling
Why
would
can't you do it
suggest
online?
that people want this.
I think the
Why?
polling
So you're
also-
telling
The
people
people
that they're
don't want
wrong?
the
I
SAVE
think-
Act.
yes.
People are saying they support
I
voter
am.
ID. The SAVE Act is very different. And when you say leave it to the states, I mean, this is what
And
happened
proof
when
of
they gutted
citizenship.
voting rights. This is what happened. If I'm going to leave it to states like Arizona, Georgia, when Brian Kemp was in office in Georgia, if you're going to leave it to states like that,
The
then
voter
he is-
turnout increased, right? That did happen. It went from
did.
1.1
So you have
million people.
83%
It went from
of
1.1
people
million
voted.
people
It
in
did
one
happen in
gubernatorial
Georgia.
year.
Do you know how
It
many
went from
people-
1.1
but you
to
know how many
1.9. That's
people
almost
waited in
double.
line for hours
Tiffany, literally
trying to
almost
vote?
double the amount of people voting.
Okay,
No, no,
Literally.
let me let the judge have a
Let
second.
me also say,
You're from Georgia.
I
All
am
right,
from
30
Georgia.
The numbers are the numbers.
30 seconds, Judge.
1.1 to
But
1.9.
Please, we have 30
but you're
seconds.
saying that in an isolated thing. There were other factors that increased the turner vote out. You
The
aren't
point-
factoring,
the
you aren't
argument was that-
factoring who's
the argument
running,
was that
you
this
aren't
would
factoring what's
disenfranchise
at
people,
line.
that They wouldn't be able to vote. That didn't happen.
But
More
I
people
think-
voted.
Oh, it did, though, Joe. It did in Georgia. That's another topic for another
All
time.
right, it
But
very much is. We appreciate the robust debate about the policy here. Everyone, thank you very much for being here. Still ahead, Jane Fonda.
So, yeah, the thing that keeps getting me here is that Joe keeps talking about voter ID. The SAVE Act is not voter ID. They really need to stop saying that. Look, I have it here for what the voter ID thing is. Voters need to confirm their identity with an ID when they vote in person. If you don't bring your ID, you may cast a provisional ballot, but you may need to take additional steps for it to count. And then you can check each state's, requirements. But that's it, a photo ID. That's why a majority of the population in this country agree with it. I think it's like 83% agree with voter ID. Yes, nothing wrong with voter ID. Have your driver's license, your photo ID, your real ID present. That's all you need. The fact that you need a passport or a birth certificate does not make sense. Especially this SAVE Act includes a thing where married women that change their name, like my wife, would not be able to vote unless she brought her birth certificate with her. That's nonsense. It's stupid. The fact that they think that voter ID and the SAVE Act are the same thing. So he's making a push here. Well, yeah, when voter ID became a thing, it increased the voting. No, that may be a very, very small part of it. But the reason voter turnout increased was, like the judge said, because of the people that were running. People felt that they needed to vote. They needed to express their concern about what's going on in this country, so a lot more people voted. Unfortunately, this last election didn't turn out the best way possible because now we have Trump in office just destroying this country left and right every single day. But they really need to stop saying that the SAVE Act is just voter ID, because it is not. Anyways, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you like more of this, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like the video so that it gets out there to the rest of the world, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take it easy. Bye-bye.